Hey, it's Andrew Huang. I've been doing a lot of sound design work lately, so I thought I would make this video just to show you a bunch of the tips and tricks and techniques that I have when making my own custom sounds, whether it's with audio or with synthesis. So let's get into it. Layering. It's amazing how much power there is in combining just a few sounds, or sometimes even just two sounds, to different amounts and being able to create something new with them. So I'm gonna demonstrate this with a snare. We'll just get those three different sounding snares that were just kind of at random where my cursor was. Let's play them all together. And as I mess around with the volume of each sample, you'll hear how they combine to create what sounds like one new snare, which can be quite different based on the volume settings of each one. Much fuller sound, a different character than any of them individually, and I kind of like that. I'm gonna save that one. The second tip is to record your own sounds. I love working with other people's samples and I would never rule that out, but obviously if you record your own stuff, it's unique to you. You can make it exactly how you want. So I'm gonna demonstrate, I'm gonna record my golden pineapple today. And I'm gonna show you the next tip as I record this, which is that the exciter is as important as the object. What does that mean? Well, things generally don't make sounds on their own. You need the thing that makes the sound, and then you also need the thing that makes the thing make the sound. The object and the exciter. I did a really fun demonstration of this in my Plonk video. Using different objects will produce different sounds. So when I'm recording the pineapple, it's not just gonna be that I'm hitting the pineapple. It's gonna be, what am I hitting the pineapple with? It's gonna be, how am I hitting the pineapple? If you've watched any of my found sound videos, you've seen me do this a ton. You've seen me experiment with just my hands. The sound is different if I flick something with my fingernail than if I rap on it with my knuckles, or slap it with my fingertips, or hit it with my palm. All of these details make a difference. All right, the next trick is a sound design staple. It's pitch shifting. So let's just take some of those pineapple sounds we recorded and pitch shift them around. That was all just this sound. So building off of that, the next idea I want to look at is changing pitch over time. So using the same pineapple sound, do you hear how there's kind of a scoop into that note? What if we make that more pronounced by drawing a pitch envelope at the start of this sound so it starts from even lower? Or we could go the other way. We could have this take longer. What if we change timing without changing pitch? And Ableton lets you do that as well. So check out this laser beamish synth that I made earlier. I can stretch that out. And now it's quite a different thing. It's got all these interesting textures, which you can further mess with using Ableton's different warp settings. The grain size. That's changing the size of the tiny little audio clips that Ableton is dissecting this sound into and repeating in order to stretch it out. As I make the grain size pretty large, you can start to hear them quite distinctly. And that's just the texture warp mode. So Complex Pro is another one that tends to hold on to a bit more of the original character. And Beats mode will just loop whatever grain it grabs for whatever beat duration you choose. That one's basically Pac-Man. And so if we combine these things, we have a stretched out sound and we start messing with the pitch envelope. You can just get crazy with it so fast. All right, so let's get into some synth stuff now. I'm gonna demonstrate everything on Arturio's new Pigments plugin. This is one of the things that I was hired to do some sound design for. Still working on it, but 15 of my presets are gonna be added into the Pigments library. And also, full disclosure, Arturia is sponsoring this little segment. They just wanted to do some kind of feature of Pigments on my channel. They said I could do whatever I want, so I'm gonna use it to teach some sound design. It's actually laid out really well for this because in the middle here, you can see all of the active modulations, and whichever one you want to assign, you just click on, and then at the bottom, you can go through the controls for each of those modulation sources. So one thing I like to do is assign an envelope to a timbral parameter besides the filter. It's really common to do a sound like this, where you got the filter opening up every time you press a note, giving that wow wow sound. But I like experimenting with other things to shape the attack of a sound, so that could be like putting the envelope on the pitch. But we can get even more interesting than that. I'm gonna switch to a wavetable synth. And I like to just put a tiny bit of that envelope modulating the position of the wavetable. You don't even need that much of it. So that adds a nice bit of movement and a different sort of quality. I like to do this on the wavefold as well. And of course, experimenting with the envelope shape is gonna change that quite a lot. Maybe we don't even need the filter stuff anymore. So that was a really quick way to make like a dubsteppy growl. You could use this concept on any kind of sound, whether it's percussive or melodic, just finding something more interesting than the filter cutoff to adjust on the attack. Okay, next tip, sample and hold. Listen to this sound. So here I was trying to make sort of a spooky horror percussion hit, and there's two main components to the sound. There's this sort of low drum, and then there's kind of a high ring that happens sometimes. Just that little ghostly trail. I really like this sound. So a quick explanation of sample and hold for those of you who might not know. Let's head over to the sample and hold panel. This has nothing to do with audio sampling. It's probably the more common use of the term sample in music. Take a piece of audio, do what you want with it. The four of us are gonna take the same audio sample and use it as the basis of a new track. In synthesis, sample and hold refers to sampling a value. So your sample and hold circuit is reading a value from, could be anywhere, and when it receives a trigger, it will hold on the most recent value it received. And it's a great way to interject a little bit of randomness into a patch, or a whole lot of randomness. So in this patch, I'm sampling white noise, which is kind of the most chaotic it can be. We could get any possible value from high to low. And I'm triggering the sample and hold with my keyboard. So every time I press a note, it's getting a new value that it's holding on. And if we go over here to see what I've assigned it to, it's going to the wavetable position as well as the LFO rate. So you can see the wavetable move there, slightly changing the timbre every time I hit a key. And we also can see this LFO changing to a different speed every time I press a key. And maybe you could tell that LFO is affecting the pitch of that little ghostly note. You can see it moving up here, this fine tune knob. Now, if we go over here to combinate, I'm also dividing my keyboard velocity value by the sample and hold value to generate a second related random signal. So this combinate thing is a pretty cool feature, and I think kind of unique to soft synths. It's something that I do a lot in my modular, my hardware workflow, combining control voltage signals to produce a new modulation that's sort of related to what you already have. I can't think of anywhere I've seen this in a soft synth before, though. Now, if we hop up here to the combinator destinations, we can see I've assigned it to a bunch of stuff in different amounts. So there's the wavetable of the first oscillator. You can see it jumping around there, so the drum sound is a little bit different in tonality each time you press a key. It's also assigned to the second oscillator's coarse tuning and fine tuning. So that's that ghostly note, and that's why it's a different note every time I hit it. And I also assigned it to both the coarse and the fine knobs because I didn't want it to be set to the Western 12-tone scale. I wanted it to be any possible pitch, but just within a range that I set. Because it's horror, it's spooky, it doesn't have to be on key. The filter that high note is going through is a bandpass, and I'm adjusting the cutoff value with this sample and hold combinated thing. And that's why there isn't one of those high notes on every single trigger, because sometimes the note is just out of range of what the filter's letting through. So that sample and hold, it's not a thing that I see talked a lot about outside of modular synth communities, so I thought it would be a great thing to share here. You can assign it to all different kinds of things to just breathe a bit of life into a patch. Next tip, assign your macros. Macro knobs are a single knob that can control multiple parameters and can control each of them in different ranges. So it's like having 10 more arms, and you could tweak all these knobs at the same time. It'll make your patches and your performances way more dynamic. So here's an example that's kind of acid-y, but instead of just having a filter cutoff that I'm tweaking in typical acid fashion, I'm also adjusting the linear FM of one oscillator and the phase modulation of the second oscillator. So that sounds like this. As another example, here's a string patch that I made. And here I've assigned this macro to so many things. We've got wavetable position, wavefold, the volume of a few different oscillators, and the cutoff of 2 different filters. And in this case, I didn't have performance in mind, even though you could totally move this knob while you're playing to do some performative stuff there. But I just felt that there were so many possible timbres for this patch that having this one knob adjusting so many different things would kind of give you so many different patches all in one. So next time I'm looking for a plucky string sound, I might just pull up this patch and then just dial that in and have what I'm looking for. And have all different variations of a string sound that I could pull from to use in a piece and not feel like I'm always using the same string patch, even though it would be all the same patch. Moving on, every sound needs to be in the right space. I still spend tons of time with every song that I work on dialing in different reverb and delay settings on almost every single element of a song. Vocals, guitars, drums, synths, and even within that, often you want your background vocals in a different space from your lead vocals. A lot of the times you want a different kind of reverb on your snare drum. This can be make or break to a song or to a sound. So for example, listen to this really useless sound that I'm just gonna put some reverb and delay on here, and now it's like a cool drum in a cave. Okay, one final tip that I'll leave you with is to use effects in parallel. It's quite common to use effects serially, so putting one after the other, and each one affects everything that came before it. But you can get into some interesting sonic territory by having multiple copies of the same signal going to a bunch of completely different effects. So let me show you a quick, basic example. I'm gonna put this synth sound through a couple distortions. Now let's just hear what it would sound like by putting some reverb on that. It sounds fine, but I think in this case I would actually prefer the reverb to just be on the dry signal. So that's a little bit dreamier. The reverb is a lot cleaner, so it makes the synth line stand out a bit more. Anyway, like I said, super basic example, but I hope it gets the gears turning. Pigments is actually really great for this kind of effects experimentation because it gives you 2 insert channels of effects, 3 slots for effects on each of those channels, 13 possible effects for each of those slots, and then the channels can either be routed serially A into B, B into A, or parallel A and B stacked together, not affecting each other. And then on top of that, there's also an effect send bus where you have another 3 slots with 13 possible effects for each of those 3 slots. So yeah, very comprehensive effects section. The whole synth really is comprehensive. There's so much in there. It's really a beast. Congrats to Arturia for the launch of Pigments. The sounds that I designed for it are supposed to be added in there in a week or 2. I'll link to them in the description. We're also doing a giveaway. There's a few licenses of Pigments up for grabs, as well as a Drum Brute Impact. More details about that are in the description. If you have any other sound design tips or techniques you want to share, please leave a comment or join us on the 820 Crew Discord. That'll be linked in the description as well. Hope you enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching and subscribing. I'll see you next time. Don't know if any of this is coming across right.